this point in time, what can I do now when I am stuck at home? And how is what I'm doing going to impact my application, the success of my applications? So Lauren and Hami, do you have any suggestions, specific ones for students who are deciding to apply for this coming intake? Or, I mean, I think that's over, but I mean, in the next coming year.
I would say don't be, try not to get stuck in the fact that you can't see your friends and you can't go out and you're stuck, in front of a screen a lot of the time, and think more about what you're really passionate about and what you're interested in. And this is like, if assuming that you're, in a safe place and that you're healthy and not worried about those kinds of difficult things that lots of people are going through, it is a time when you can explore your interests and, read books and watch documentaries and really figure out what you're passionate about and move from there. So I think it's keeping an open mind and taking this as an opportunity to explore what might be a future career or future passion is really important right now.
Specifically for me, I have a student who, when he put in his application for this coming July, he did mention to me that will studying Chinese before his semester starts, helping his application process. I think, the good and maybe even just the con of applying for both Australia and New Zealand universities is for these institutions in these countries, they are more grade focused. So unlike the US or maybe to some extent Canada, they don't focus as much in the extracurricular activities. So I think if you are planning to target universities in both Australia and New Zealand, it's very important for you to make sure you excel in your grades. And at this point, really do a lot of research to narrow down the list of universities that you'd like to apply for, because there are individual applications instead of one portal like the UCAS that applies to 5 straight. So if you can narrow down your list, that means less work and finding out the entry requirements to know how you can maybe boost out your final grades for the application process. Yeah, and I mean, if you're doing the APs and I think the SATs are canceled now. So for those who
Not
are taking
entirely, but
yeah,
harder and harder to come by, for sure.
Yeah. So if you can take, I mean, Australian and New Zealand universities doesn't really focus much on the SATs, but really your high school diploma cumulative grade is what matters. Yeah, they understand that the SATs or ACT is canceled. Is getting harder to come by. So that's really for students planning to focus on Australian and New Zealand universities. Is it the same for Canada?
Yeah, the same advice pretty much applies to Canada, except for a very small number of courses. Your final grades are still super important. So yeah, even though online learning and attending classes over Zoom isn't ideal, just try your best to keep your grades up. Don't just because you're not sitting in a classroom getting watched by your teachers doesn't mean that you can slack off. And yeah, and also if you're looking at US universities, another thing that that they really look at is how you would be, what kind of community member you would be on their college campus, and this would be this period of time is a great time for you to start getting more involved in a community and to show colleges next year that you can add value to their campuses. And even though there are a lot of high schools that have removed the community service hour requirements from the graduation requirements. It doesn't mean that community service becomes any less important or any less meaningful. If anything, it becomes even more meaningful now that you're stepping up to help your community virtually, or because you're not required to do it anymore. So over here in Toronto, I work with a lot of high school students, and they're doing all sorts of things like fundraising online is a really straightforward and relatively low effort way of helping those in need. Or I have students who are distributing masks and homemade meals to the homeless, obviously keeping social distances and taking all the precautions to protect their own health and the health of others. So it's a good time to kind of just look around you and see who might need help. And yeah, just because you can't go out and visit old folks' homes or go to another country for a community service trip doesn't mean that your charity or your kindness has to stop there.
Yeah.
Lauren and Hami, because everyone is kind of like in the same situation at the moment, and they can definitely do and extend their help in the community. But wouldn't it be the same then for everyone? What if everybody? What if two type of students decide to make masks or help the in the food, what do you call that, like helping out with the food distribution, etc.? So isn't it the same for them? How will this help them stand out in their application process?
That's a good question because, it's important for students to think about how they can help and also think about their own skills in terms of like what they would want to do. So, for example, I have a student who is basically a chef. He has his own personal chef business. And for him, we've been brainstorming ways for him to contribute using those skills in the community. So originally he had made some meals for the migrant workers here, but they've kind of limited that. And so he's going to now make videos and like video content to share with the domestic helper centers here in Singapore, because he actually is fantastic at fine dining and plating. So I think it's like, you should raise money and you should distribute masks, but like, what's your thing? So if you're a dancer, like make dance videos to fundraise. If you're a great writer, like come up with, ways that you can, use that skill to raise money or make masks, things like that. So I think it's not just about like, oh, I'm checking off a box, but how can you make it relevant to your own life and your own interests?
So everyone
that's very true. And another way, so you and the next student could be doing identical activities, say making masks, but how you talk about it in your essays later on will be very different, because maybe you are making masks because your mom is a nurse in the hospital and you want to help them out, but the next student who's making masks could be doing it for a completely different reason. So when you actually talk about the activities that you do, that's when you differentiate yourself from everyone else.
Definitely.
Yeah, so it's basically how they pen down their own intention and own interest. So it's a unique story for everyone, regardless of what they do, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's really some great sharing, and I personally think students will get out a lot of it. And it's not something that we can cover in an hour, to be honest. It's because it's so different for every student. It's a very unique journey for each one, and also very different depending on which study destination they decide to choose on. Don't you think?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's why we spend so many hours with our students trying to find out their unique stories and trying to find, ways to tell their stories in the way that reflect them.
Yeah. That being said, we would really love to help students who are struggling at the moment. It's very trying times and we want to extend our help. We are offering a free bespoke counseling session for anyone who may need some guidance at this point in time. So uh, I've put up a link here for you to fill up an interest for a consultation here. So I know that a few of you are fellow admissions counselors.